What if the world you're experiencing right now, the job you have, the relationships you're in, the bank balance you check, the mirror you look into each morning, is not reality, but merely a reflection? And what if that reflection could change the moment you change? Neville Goddard once said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and continue feeling it until that which you feel becomes your reality." In those few words lies the most extraordinary truth. Your world is not happening to you. It is happening through you, through your assumptions, through your imagination, through what you dare to believe is true of yourself. And yet, how many of us spend our lives hoping things will improve, waiting for the evidence before we allow ourselves to feel fulfilled? We believe we must see results before we can feel differently. But Neville's teaching flips that upside down. He shows us that to manifest anything, love, abundance, healing, purpose, we must begin not with the world, but with the inner world, where assumption is the seed of reality. This isn't wishful thinking. This is creative consciousness in action. In this video, you're going to learn how to assume a new state, not tomorrow, not after you've earned it, but now, and by doing so, shift your outer world to match the inner. We'll explore why imagination is the true creative force, how your subconscious mind accepts what you feel is true, and why assumption, held with persistence, is the very foundation of every experience you call real. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why the unseen precedes the seen, why reacting keeps you stuck, and how you can step into a new version of yourself simply by living from the end. So before we go further, ask yourself, are you willing to assume that the power to transform your life is already within you? Because everything that follows depends on that single decision. Let's begin. Assumption is not a passive daydream. It is not hoping, wishing, or waiting. It is the conscious act of embodying a reality before it appears. It is choosing to dwell in the feeling that your desire is already fulfilled. Neville said, "Assume a virtue, if you have it not." Why? Because your world mirrors not your lack but your inner conviction. To assume means to take something upon yourself, to carry it, to inhabit it, to wear it as if it were already yours. Not in pretense, but in feeling. If you assume you are wealthy, you begin to feel the ease and confidence of someone who knows abundance. If you assume you are loved, you walk, speak, and move as one who is cherished. The assumption creates the state, and the state expresses itself through you. Every reality you've experienced so far, the beautiful and the painful, has come from an assumption you held. Consciously or unconsciously, you have always been the one planting the seeds. Neville told us, all transformation begins with an intense, burning desire to be transformed. You must want to be different before you can begin to change yourself. Then, you must make your future dream a present fact. This is the hidden key. Assumption makes the future dream a present fact. You bring tomorrow into now. You do not wait. You shift. The physical world, no matter how solid it seems, is a delayed mirror. What you feel now is what you will live later. The unseen always precedes the seen. The inner state comes first, the evidence second, and yet most people live backward, waiting for something to happen before they allow themselves to feel differently. But you are not most people. Pause and consider, what would change in your body, in your breath, in your posture if you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that your desire was already yours? Would your shoulders soften? Would your mind grow quiet? Would you smile differently? This is not about pretending. This is about choosing a state that already exists within consciousness and entering it through feeling. Assumption is the foundation. Without it, manifestation is unstable, a fleeting hope. With it, your life begins to take shape from within. It is not magic, it is law. So the question is not, can I have this? But am I willing to assume I already do? This is where the transformation begins. Why most people fail to manifest? If assumption is the foundation of reality, why do so many struggle to manifest the very things they deeply desire? They visualize, they affirm, they listen to meditations, and still life seems to move along the same old grooves, yielding the same old results. The love doesn't come, the money stays scarce, the opportunities slip by. The reason is rarely a lack of desire. It's deeper than that. The real reason most people fail to manifest is because they are unknowingly loyal to their current state of being. They are reacting to life, not creating it. Neville Goddard said, "Stop looking at the world as it is, and start seeing it as it ought to be. Then the world will begin to change." But how many of us are waiting for the world to shift before we allow ourselves to feel different? This is the great trap. We wait for evidence. We want proof before permission. But manifestation does not work that way. You cannot wait to feel free until your debts are paid. You cannot wait to feel loved until someone else shows up. You cannot wait to feel successful until the world validates you. You must assume it, and you must assume it now. Here is the truth. Your reality is not the source of your state. It is the echo of it. To believe the outer world has the power to determine your inner world is to give away the very power you were born with. You are not here to be at the mercy of what is seen. You are here to express what is unseen, to bring the invisible into form through assumption, feeling, and persistence. Neville was precise when he said, "Man moves in a world that is nothing more than his consciousness objectified." Everything you experience, think of the praise and the rejection, the gain and the loss, is a mirror. It reflects not your wishes, not your words, but your assumptions, and the dominant one always wins. Take a closer look at your life. Every recurring situation, every emotional pattern, every story you find yourself retelling, these are not accidents. These are manifestations of the states you consistently occupy. A person who assumes themselves to be overlooked will find confirmation of that everywhere. In conversation, in emails left unanswered, in the tone of a stranger's voice. They don't realize they are filtering reality through the lens of their own self-concept. And so they react, they shrink, they harden, and life continues to echo the same song. Or consider someone who feels unworthy of abundance. They might read books on prosperity, repeat wealth affirmations, daydream about a better life. But deep within, they are still wearing the emotional atmosphere of someone who expects loss. And the subconscious mind, which is the great executor of feeling, accepts this unworthiness as fact and plays it out in 1,000 different ways. Why? Because the subconscious mind does not question, it does not reason, it does not evaluate whether your assumptions are fair or logical. It simply accepts what you feel as true and brings it to life. Neville often warned, to be conscious of being poor while praying for riches is to be rewarded with that which you are conscious of being, namely, poverty. That is the law, and it does not waver. This is why most people fail to manifest. They speak from desire but feel from lack. They affirm one thing while assuming another. They try to force change through action, while secretly believing that nothing will ever truly shift. Their dominant state remains rooted in the old identity. This contradiction is what blocks the flow of manifestation. Manifestation is not about willpower. It is not about effort. It is about inner alignment, a deep and steady agreement with the reality you wish to live. And this agreement must come from feeling, not fantasy. Now let's take it deeper. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to sustain a new assumption when all around you seems to contradict it? You say, "I am abundant," but the bills arrive. You say, "I am loved," but the silence lingers. You say, "I am successful," but the world still treats you as ordinary. This is where most give up. They retreat. They say, "It doesn't work." But what they miss is that the contradiction is the test, the invitation to persist. Neville referred to this as remaining faithful to your assumption in the face of appearances. It's easy to believe when the world cooperates. It's powerful to believe when it doesn't. Because that is where the shift happens, not in the outer world, but in the inner reaction to it. Do you respond to contradiction by returning to the old state? Or do you remain loyal to the unseen? The truth is, your current circumstances are the final echoes of past assumptions. They are already on their way out. But if you react to them, if you accept them as permanent, you reactivate them, you give them life again. And so the cycle repeats. This is not punishment. It is precision. Your reality is a perfect mirror, not of your goals, not of your words, but of your feelings, your deepest, most consistent assumptions of self. So how do you break the cycle? You begin by refusing to argue with appearances. You stop letting your senses dictate what you believe about yourself. You step back from the noise of the world and return to your own inner authority. Ask yourself now, what is the emotional atmosphere I live in most of the time? Is it anxiety, defensiveness, hope without faith, or is it quiet confidence, gratitude, the calm joy of someone who knows the seed has already been planted? Because what you feel is what you're becoming. And until you assume a new state and persist in it, nothing changes. Not because life is cruel, but because consciousness is faithful. It cannot bring you what you want. It can only bring you what you are. Before we move forward, here's something for those of you who feel the truth of this but want to deepen it. Not just hear it, but live it. If Neville's words are resonating with you, You'll want to check the pinned comment after this video. There's something there, something simple, powerful, and worth sitting with. Now let's return to the power that makes all things possible, your imagination. Neville Goddard taught that imagination is not a passive faculty. It is not daydreaming. It is not fantasy. It is the spiritual workshop of reality, the place where form is given to the formless, where you shape the unseen into the seen. He said, imagination is the very gateway of reality, and most people overlook this doorway. They are trained to value logic, calculation, evidence, and external confirmation. But reality bends not to logic. It bends to feeling imagined vividly and consistently. Imagination, in the way Neville taught it, is not a tool for escape. It is a tool for embodiment. You do not use imagination to run from the present. You use it to seed the future into the now. You live from it. To live from imagination means to accept, internally and emotionally, that what you desire is already yours, not as a distant possibility, but as a present fact. This is what it means to live from the end. Most people live from the middle. They live from trying, hoping, planning, adjusting. They visualize for a few minutes, then return to doubt. But to live from the end is to feel, speak, and act as though the event has already occurred. And to do this, not once, but consistently. Neville often described a technique called scene construction. It is one of the simplest and most effective ways to engage the imagination deliberately. Choose a single scene, not a vague idea, but a specific moment that implies your wish is already fulfilled. Something short, something loopable. For example, hearing your partner whisper, "I'm so glad we found each other," seeing your name printed on a published book, feeling the weight of a house key in your palm, smiling at your phone as you read a payment received notification, sitting at a dinner table while someone congratulates you. Whatever your desire, there is a moment that implies it is done. That scene becomes your doorway. You then imagine this scene as vividly as possible. But the power is not in the image alone. It is in the emotional atmosphere. You must feel the reality of it, the satisfaction, the relief, the quiet joy. You must make it real, not by forcing it, but by relaxing into it, as you would a memory. Neville explained it this way. You must experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh were you already the one you want to be. That is the secret. You are not imagining to make it happen. You are imagining because it already has. This is where most falter. They imagine for the sake of changing the world, not realizing that the act of imagining from the end is the change itself. They return to old states the moment nothing seems to happen. They become discouraged. But manifestation is not a performance, it is a shift in identity. You don't rehearse your future, you become it. Let's speak about repetition, not as empty habit, but as mental discipline. The mind is deeply patterned. It believes what is familiar. It accepts what is repeated with emotion. So the more often you return to your imagined scene, not mechanically, but with fresh feeling, the more easily your subconscious accepts it as truth. This is not force. It is natural conditioning, and the subconscious responds powerfully to consistency. Just as a muscle grows through repeated activation, so too does an assumption become dominant through emotional rehearsal. Neville emphasized this. The subconscious does not argue with you. It accepts what you feel to be true. You are not persuading life. You are training yourself into a new inner atmosphere, into a new identity. You may notice resistance. Old thoughts will rise. Doubts will whisper. This is not failure. It is memory. The mind is simply repeating its past programming. Your work is to return, again and again, to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And over time, something shifts. What once felt like fiction begins to feel natural. What once felt distant begins to feel familiar. And when it feels familiar, when it feels real, the bridge of incidents begins to unfold. You don't need to know how. You don't need to push. You simply remain in the new state long enough for the outer world to catch up to the inner. This is the rhythm of creation. Neville once said, "The world is a mirror, forever reflecting what you are doing within yourself. And what you are doing within is imagining, constantly. The only question is whether you are doing it deliberately or by default. So ask yourself now, what scene, if played on a loop inside your mind, would change your life? Can you feel the emotion of that scene as if it were already happening? Can you dwell in it even if only for a minute? If you can, you have touched the root of all creation. Because imagination, when fused with feeling, is not just a vision, It is a command, and the world responds. To live by assumption is to move from uncertainty to inner knowing, not a rigid belief but a quiet, immovable trust that what you have imagined is already real in substance, even if not yet in form. This is where most people struggle, because we are taught from childhood to trust in what we can see, to draw conclusions from evidence. But in manifestation, evidence is the echo, not the cause. Neville said, "Faith is loyalty to the unseen reality, and that loyalty is tested most when the outer world still looks unchanged. You've imagined the scene, you've felt the end, and yet the emails are still unanswered. The bank balance still lingers at the same number. The mirror reflects the same shape. This is where most people abandon their assumption and return to doubt. But faith, true inner certainty, does not waver, because appearances have not yet conformed. It rests in the deeper knowing that the assumption itself has already been accepted by the subconscious and is now in motion. The seed is planted. The soil may still look untouched, but beneath the surface, transformation is underway. Think of the imagination as the gardener and the subconscious as the fertile earth. Once the seed is sown, with feeling, with repetition, with conviction, the only work left is trust. Not passivity, not indifference, but trust that it is done. Neville used the analogy of pregnancy often. When a woman becomes pregnant, she may not see the child immediately, but she knows beyond doubt that it is forming. She prepares. She lives in expectancy. She adjusts her habits and carries herself differently. She does not need daily proof. Her body already knows. This is the level of assumption Neville encouraged. You feel your desire into being. You plant it with imagination. You nourish it with repetition. And then you live in the atmosphere of fulfillment, even if nothing yet reflects it back to you. There is a word Neville used that rarely gets attention: non-reaction. To cultivate inner certainty is to become unmoved by what seems to contradict your desire. This does not mean you deny what you see. It means you stop giving it meaning. You stop telling yourself, nothing is working, simply because the outer world is slow to echo the inner change. He said, "Do not condition your prayer by seeing only what you want in the outer world. See it inside. Feel it. Persist in it. The outer world will follow." Persistence is not struggle. It is not willpower. It is emotional fidelity, the act of returning again and again to the inner state of fulfillment, even when your senses tempt you to doubt. One of Neville's most powerful techniques for cultivating this fidelity is what he called sats, the state akin to sleep. It is a drowsy, relaxed state just before sleep, where the conscious mind relaxes its grip and the subconscious becomes most impressionable. In this state, you replay your imaginal scene, your short loop that implies your desire is fulfilled, not as a wish but as a memory, as something already lived. You enter it, feel it, surrender to it, and then drift into sleep with that feeling. In doing so, you bypass the filters of logic and impress the subconscious directly. There is also the technique of revision. Every time something undesirable happens, an argument, a rejection, a moment of fear, you can revisit the event in imagination and change it, not to escape it, but to train your subconscious to accept a new version of the past, which alters the emotional residue you carry into the future. Neville wrote, "Change the feeling of I, and you change your world. Your assumptions, when persisted in, will harden into fact." This is the hidden power of assumption. You are not just visualizing. You are rewiring identity. When you live in inner certainty, the world begins to respond in unexpected ways. People show up. Conversations shift. Delays dissolve. You find yourself moved without effort to be in the right place at the right time. These are not accidents. They are the result of an inner change in being. But none of this happens through force. It happens through feeling, through faith, through sustained inner conviction. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, knowing kind. The kind that doesn't flinch when reality delays. The kind that smiles at silence because it already knows the answer has been given. Ask yourself, can you be still and faithful in the invisible? Can you carry your wish fulfilled not as a hope, but as your new normal? This is the soil of manifestation. You have nothing to chase, nothing to prove, only a state to return to again and again until it becomes your dwelling place. Because when you live in that state long enough, life must follow. It has no choice. It always reflects the one who dares to assume, daily living as the new you. The goal is not to imagine once or to feel something only during meditation. The goal is to carry the state, to live from it, to let it infuse your daily walk, your choices, your thoughts, and your interactions. This is the deeper meaning of Neville's call to live from the end. To live as the new you means to allow the imagined fulfillment to become your emotional baseline, not a fleeting moment of inspiration, but a sustained assumption of being. And this is not about pretending. Pretending wears out. This is about embodying a version of yourself that already exists in consciousness and making it your dwelling place. Neville said, "To be transformed, the whole basis of your thoughts must change, but your thoughts cannot change unless you have new ideas, for you think from your ideas." In other words, your outer life is a reflection of the inner self you identify with. So what does this look like in everyday life? It begins in the morning. Before the phone, before the world enters, pause and assume. Step into your chosen identity, not just with words, but with feeling. Ask yourself, how would I feel waking up as someone who already has what I desire? What thoughts would naturally occur to me? What mood would I carry? This is not a performance. It is a quiet agreement with a new version of reality. As you move through the day, you will meet the old world. You will see old patterns, hear old voices, face old circumstances. But you are not here to obey the old. You are here to remain faithful to the new. This is the real discipline, not in forcing results, but in choosing to respond from your assumed state. If you are living as someone who is already loved, how do you respond when someone ignores you? If you are living as someone already wealthy, how do you behave when an unexpected expense appears? If you are living as someone successful, what do you do with a temporary setback? You do not deny reality, but you do refuse to let it define you. Neville emphasized that the world is a mirror. It does not lead, it follows. And so you must begin to lead with your assumption, not your reaction. There's a subtle shift that occurs when you truly start to live from the end. You begin to carry yourself differently. You walk with a sense of knowing, even if you can't explain it. You are less interested in proving, less worried about how, and more absorbed in being. You also become more selective with your thoughts, not because you fear negativity, but because you understand that your dominant state is always being impressed upon the subconscious. You begin to catch yourself when slipping into old roles, the struggler, the outsider, the unworthy one, and instead, you return, gently, quietly, with conviction. Neville called this inner movement. He said, "There is no one to change but self, and to change the self, you must assume that you are already the person you want to be." This does not require dramatic rituals. It requires consistency. A few seconds of feeling your wish fulfilled while washing the dishes. A moment of smiling inwardly at your imagined success during a walk. A quiet rehearsal of your scene before a conversation. A soft internal thank you that affirms it is done. These small repeated acts build a new state of being, and over time, the state becomes natural. You no longer try to feel abundant, you simply do. You no longer try to feel loved, you naturally assume that you are. And when that happens, the world begins to reflect your new dwelling place without resistance. You may not notice it at first. A different tone in someone's voice. An unexpected opportunity. A subtle shift in your own posture. But one by one, the pieces begin to align. And the change feels inevitable, because internally, it already was. The new you does not need to constantly visualize or affirm. Because now you're no longer practicing the state. You are living in it. And from that place, manifestation becomes effortless, not because life has become easier, but because you have become different. Neville put it this way: man's chief delusion is his conviction that there are causes other than his own state of consciousness. Once you remove that delusion, once you realize that you are the cause, you stop chasing life. You start choosing it. So ask yourself, what habits, reactions, and choices no longer belong to the version of me I've assumed? What does it feel like to walk through life as someone for whom it is already done? These are not abstract questions. They are access points, openings into a new way of being. The life you want is not something to reach for. It is something to return to, over and over, until it becomes the most natural thing in the world. Because the truth is, it's already within you, waiting for your assumption to bring it forth. Neville Goddard taught a bold truth. The world is yourself pushed out. Everything you experience in the outer world is a reflection of the assumptions you hold within. This isn't philosophy, it's law. And once understood, it becomes the key to radical transformation. But most people resist this truth. It's far more comfortable to blame circumstances, to point at other people, to say, they're the reason I feel this way. Yet Neville insists that your world can only show you what you first assumed to be true of yourself. And if you continue to react to the outer, you remain stuck in the very conditions you want to escape. Your relationships, career, finances, health, all are shaped by your dominant self-concept. If you believe deep down that you are unworthy of love, you'll experience neglect, rejection, or emotional distance. Not because life is cruel, but because it is faithful. It reflects your state, not your surface wishes. Neville said, "Change your conception of yourself and you will automatically change the world in which you live." Notice he didn't say might. He said will. The moment you assume something new about yourself and remain loyal to it, life begins to mirror that assumption. Take your attention off appearances. Don't waste energy trying to change the mirror. Change what you're reflecting. If the world seems hostile, ask what in you believes you must always defend yourself. If the world feels scarce, ask what in you has assumed that abundance is hard to attain. The mirror cannot show anything other than what you are being. This is where the real shift happens. When you stop trying to get from the world and start asking, what am I being right now? What am I assuming as true? About life, about love, about success, about me. To take ownership of your assumptions is not blame, it's liberation. You are no longer at the mercy of chance. You no longer need to wait for people to change, for conditions to align, or for permission to feel better. You assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and the world bends to reflect it. Neville didn't mean you had to control every thought, but he did teach that your dominant inner state, the emotional atmosphere you return to again and again, is what crystallizes into form. That means it's less about saying perfect affirmations and more about what you deeply feel to be true. When you walk through life embodying your chosen identity, you influence everything around you, not through force, but through vibration. You shift your posture, your tone, your expectations, and others respond. Conversations change, doors open, new outcomes emerge. It's not magic, it's alignment. But here's what stops most people: time. They plant the seed of a new assumption and dig it up the next day, looking for results. When nothing changes immediately, they doubt. They go back to the old state, and the mirror reflects that shift. But the mirror has a delay. Your world is the echo of what you felt days, weeks, even months ago. To expect instant transformation is to misunderstand the rhythm of creation. Neville often said, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist in that assumption. Persistence is key, not anxious repetition, but quiet confidence. Trust that the new state has been accepted. Trust that life is catching up. So what does it mean to live this way? It means becoming more interested in your inner world than in appearances. It means choosing not to argue with what you see, but instead asking, what is this showing me about what I've assumed? Then, instead of reacting, you revise. Assume something new. Step into a different self-concept. Not someday. Now. The world is not your enemy. It's not random. It's not indifferent. It is loyal. To you. Not your hopes, but your assumptions. And when those assumptions change, everything changes. Because the world can only show you one thing, yourself. Pushed out. Before you go, check the pinned comment for something created especially for you. If you've ever wanted daily reminders of truth, power, and imagination, that's where to start.